Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The transfer commits are starting to roll in as Traeshon Holden going across the country and committing to Oregon. This is, I think, a very big get. If you look at the teams that are poised to win the Pac-12, if Bo Nix comes back, this offense looks great. This defense, I think, will continue to develop under Dan Lanning. Oregon has to be one of the teams to beat in the Pac-12. Excited to get into this. Before we do, though, again, just want to say thank you guys for the support you guys have shown the channel. Again, we love talking ball. We love talking the NFL draft, and we love talking ball with you guys in the comment section. So if you guys do enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your thoughts in the comment section. We appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Dill, let's get to the commit. What are your early takes here?
Yeah, I mean, to start off, I think this is a big commitment in the portal for the Ducks, just because you are now having to replace Seven McGee and Thornton, like two guys who Seven McGee didn't have a great year. It seemed like this year wasn't a ton on the field but Thornton was a guy certainly you needed to replace his production, and they're getting a guy who he's a hard one because at Alabama it wasn't wildly productive. Only had 330 yards last year and 6 touchdowns on a team that I think everybody was a little disappointed with how lack of explosion in that offense. So
Bill O'Brien killed that Alabama team. That team was way too talented to look as bad as it did. The offensive line wasn't great. I get it. But pretty much the only success you saw that offense have was when Bryce Young was making plays and kind of playing backyard football. Like what Bill O'Brien was throwing up there stunk. It never worked. And Traeshon Holden probably trying to get out of there. And he's going to go to the Pac-12 where you see a lot of guys transferring out west. You don't know what the Pac-12 is going to look like in a couple of years, but a team like Colorado obviously making some noise. But I think what you saw from Oregon their first year under Dan Lanning, you have to be extremely optimistic about where this program is going. And Dan Lanning is showing he's getting guys through the portal, but he's also getting guys out of high school. And Oregon brought Dan Lanning in because not only is he a developer of great defenses, but he also did a tremendous job recruiting top-end talent to go play for that Georgia defense. And he's doing the same for this whole program down in Eugene, Oregon, or up in Eugene, Oregon, I should say.
Yeah, and this is an Oregon team that it feels like left some meat on the bone this year. I'm still not – I think they're the best team in the conference. If you were to ask me just straight, who would I pick against these big dogs? And I know they got boat raced by Georgia early, but as that team got better and better, it felt like they never kind of hit their stride. The defense, I was like somewhat disappointed with, I would say, for the most part. You look at some of the talent they had with Sewell and Flo, who's obviously leaving, but guys just not producing like they should. I mean, Justin Flo hasn't produced at Oregon like I think you would have wanted for his 3 years. So I think you're waiting for them to kind of crack in and do what we thought Oklahoma was going to do. And Dan Lanning were like guys who were going to shift to defense. And I don't think you quite saw that.
Yeah, I think it was tough, though, because Dan Lanning came in. Yes, there were some talented guys, but there were also some massive holes. Like that secondary outside of Christian Gonzalez was bare. I mean, very, very young, very, very inexperienced. And you saw teams like Washington give them fits. Now, I think it's going to take a year or two to have Dan Lanning get the guys that he wants to get into that program and into that scheme on the defense side of the ball. In 3 years, you asked me how this Oregon defense is going to look. I am very confident it's going to be, if not the best, one of the best defenses in the Pac-12. And you look at the immediate impact of Traeshon Holden and what this team will look like next year. Bo Nix, I think it would make a lot of sense for him to come back. I get he had a great year, but he's probably staring at maybe at best a day 2 pick, probably more of a day 3 pick. You go back to Oregon with the NIL money, you're seeing a lot of guys choose to come back for that extra year of eligibility. Michael Penix just did it at Washington, and they're looking like a team that's going to make some noise in the Pac-12. You're getting some weapons. You're going to have a good offensive line at Oregon, even though some of those guys are going to be leaving. This offense looks – they're getting a guy that – talk about Traeshon Holden as a player, 6'3", 195. He's good at playing the ball in the air. He's a bigger physical receiver. That's how Oregon likes to make their money. They like to run the football and then beat you over the top. Traeshon Holden's a guy that can win vertically, averaged almost 14 yards per reception last year in an Alabama offense that stunk. I'm very excited to see how he works in to this Oregon team, especially on the offense side.
Yeah, and I like to think, I mean, obviously we all saw Troy Franklin really was able to take tops off defenses. In Holden, you're bringing in a big athlete. I would like to see maybe if he can do a little bit more catch and run, play some of the in more of a role in the screen game and some of the other parts that I think you would have wanted to see, like a Seven McGee or even maybe a Thornton, like be a little more productive in. And I don't know that you got that. So much of that offense seemed like it was predicated on hitting those big plays to Franklin, which is good. But I wonder if this can be a good little pairing where, yes, you have two really good athletes in Holden and Franklin, but a guy in Holden who you've seen be a little more effective, catch and run underneath, some of that stuff that, again, I think you might have been missing a little bit when guys like Seven McGee just weren't producing at the rate I think you would have wanted after his year last year, which is pretty good.
What another thing I'd want to note is this is not a dig at the Pac-12 listeners that are listening, but you see SEC talent come over to the Pac-12 and they do well. I mean, Bo Nix is a prime example, was kind of a guy that you knew was talented, couldn't really put it together in the SEC. Again, he was also in a tough situation. That's a little bit of the blueprint you're seeing is these guys in the SEC are dominant physical athletes, maybe not in the best spots. I think you could say the same for Bo Nix and Traeshon Holden. I mean, Bo Nix playing at Auburn, horrible offensive line, no wide receivers, not much of a run game. He comes to Oregon where he has all that and he puts together. I mean, we were talking about him as a Heisman candidate at week 8 in the season. Traeshon Holden could be a very similar example. He's a good recruit out of high school and really didn't really put it together at Alabama. His first couple of years buried in the depth chart. I mean, you're not going to get on the field over guys like Jamison Williams, John Mechie. Then when he finally gets his shot, the offense was in complete shambles. Wasn't a really good spot for him. He's coming over to Oregon where you know you're going to have solid quarterback play, whether it's Bo Nix, whether it's not Ty Thompson. You're going to get good play. You're going to have a good run game, and I'm excited to see. It's always exciting to see a good athlete, especially from the SEC, go to a different conference where he's maybe going to look at it, get into a better spot. I think this is a situation that Traeshon Holden finds himself in, and I mean, the Oregon Ducks, I would not expect this to be the last transfer they take, as when you're a new coach, that's a way to build a program and roster fast. You're going to see Deion Sanders do that at Colorado. You're probably going to see Dan Lanning do that as the head coach of Oregon.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you got a program like Oregon, I mean, any of these big dogs, I think, should be taking transfers 2, 3, 4 a year because, like, why not? If you can fill a hole immediately and guys want to come play there. It's like Holden, like, yeah, you hear this little talk about him going to Iowa. What wide receiver wants to go play at Iowa? Like, yeah, they brought in Cade McNamara, but that's not like – I don't think that makes that some paradise for wide receiver play. You look at –
If you're a wide receiver and you want to go to Iowa, you are out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at Oregon, you saw what they were doing last year. And again, for Oregon, this is a very good plug-and-play. Replace who you're losing. Obviously, they're going to have their young talent, but I think this is a guy who can propel them through another year of Bo Nix that you don't want to waste, and you want a surefire guy. Not that he's like a surefire number one, but I think he can be a very good running mate with.
I would be very surprised if he doesn't play a lot of snaps for Oregon and is a key contributor. And one thing to leave on is Dan Lanning recruited probably a bunch of these guys during his time in the SEC, and I wouldn't be surprised whether it's on the defense or offensive side of the ball. I mean, he was one of the best recruiters in that area, the most talented area of high school football in the whole entire country. I wouldn't be surprised. You're thinking about recruiting nowadays. Like, you lose out on a high school kid in 2020, you keep in touch. You don't burn the bridges because they might find themselves in the portal in 2022, and this is probably what you're seeing right now. There's going to be a lot of guys leaving, especially from schools maybe like Georgia, Alabama, guys that Dan Lanning recruited out of high school. Could be a little pipeline to go to Oregon. Again, I really am confident where this Oregon team is going. Dan Lanning is not only a stud coach, he's a stud recruiter. He's going to get talent to Oregon. You want to go play. You know the facilities are dope. You know you're going to look sweet playing Saturday night. Like, if I'm a young kid, I want to go play for Oregon, especially with Dan Lanning as a coach. Very, very exciting program to watch, especially in the transfer portal. Excited about this team. And again, we appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do like the content, once again, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.